Hey, what's going on, SG Squared listener? Jason Banzoff here, producer for the Group Talk Network of podcasts. We're going to be playing some former episodes to give you new content every single week. Some of these may be from the past couple of years, but they are still relevant today. You may hear something about COVID or some other things that may have gone at that time, so don't be worried. We did not go back in time. However, these are going to be great episodes for you to listen to, so make sure you tune in to SG Squared every single week. Now on to the episode. Hello, and welcome to SG Squared. Steve Gladen, Global Small Groups Pastor at Saddleback Church, pulls from his 20-plus years of small group ministry experience to encourage and equip listeners to lead more effective small group ministry. Sit back, learn, and enjoy SG Squared with Steve Gladen.
On to our leadership learning. Steve, what's the leadership learning you want to challenge our small group people with this month?
Yeah, I mean, it's somewhat of a basic one, but it's an important one. And as I'm, looking at this third block, I'm just like going, if there's an equation that's out there for each one of us, it's just that opportunity plus opposition will equal God's will. And when you're looking at opportunity and when you're looking at opposition, when you look at this through the lens of a small group pastor, we are in the best time for evangelism. We are really in a zone. When you look at the four soils parable that's in 3 of the 4 gospels, where 3 of the soils are bad, 1 of them is good, we have an opportunity because there are 5 major storms that have been working on the bad soil. And when you look at those, over the last year, we've had global infirmity, we've had social instability, we've had financial insecurity, we've had racial inequity, and we've had political uncivility. And when you look at these 5, big storms that we have had in our culture, and it's been pretty much planet-wide, evangelism is at a time that's better than ever. Now, when that is the opportunity, evangelism is what we're about. Of course, we want to grow them in all 5 of the purposes, which we're going to touch on the next block of, fellowship is the foundation to work through discipleship and serving and evangelism and worship. But when you look at these 5 major storms that have just taken through and plagued us, there's great opposition that is ahead of us. I mean, basically, the church only has a few hours a week. If someone goes to temple courts and house to house, they've only got, maybe 2, maybe 3 hours a week. But, there's 166 other hours or 165 other hours that are plaguing and moving people in directions that, are contrary to what we want to see happen. And I would just encourage you that as these storms are there, one of the greatest ways to maximize opportunity is for our small groups to listen to what people are saying and to minister where you're starting to hear pain. I think it was C.S. Lewis that said, God whispers in our joys, but he shouts in our pains. And pain is just God's megaphone. And as group leaders, your groups have an amazing opportunity through these 5 storms to plant seeds of opportunity of the good news of what Jesus is all about. And groups not only can plant seeds of, the gospel, but also minister to people in their pain. Because like I said before, if the world likes what it sees, they're going to listen to what you say. And that's why we've had so many people accept Christ through our food distribution, because there's been a high level of people that are just hungry. And if you've ever skipped a meal, you get a first world problem of hunger. But when you've been without food for a week or sustenance without, gone a week or so, you start to feel the pain, not only hunger pains, but you also start to feel the pain of the culture, of parts of the culture. And this pandemic has kind of given us a little bit of a distorted world, because there's been people who've done quite well in the during the pandemic. There's also been people who've done, because all 5 storms have washed up onto their shore. It's been, just a painful time. And the time has never been like the best time for your small groups to be the friends to the people that are in their circles of influence. And we have spent so much time focusing on the opposition. I mean, a couple shows ago, we listed like 12 opposition pain points that were happening in your small group ministry that your church was brushing up against. We spend so much time that we're getting focused on the opposition. We just missed the opportunity. And I think what I'd want to say to you as a small group point person in this leadership learning is part of what we've got to learn is that there's going to be opposition. But if you want to see God's will really come to play, you've got to look at the opportunities that are before you. There's a great scripture in Ezra that talks about, when they were coming back, when they were coming back out of the Israelites were coming back out of captivity. If I can get that story right, there were part of the people in Ezra 3 that were so excited about, coming back and laying the foundation to the temple and reclaiming their home, coming out of captivity for 70 years. But there were also people who remember what the temple was like, and they were very sorrowful, and they focused a lot on the sorrow. And there's some great leadership learning out of there, because you can focus on the opposition or you can focus on the opportunity. And I get that both are important, but sometimes there's a distorted amount of motion and conversation that is spent on one versus the other. And so often we lose sight that people will focus on what was. And I've seen that at Saddleback, that there's a lot of our core that miss what it was, and they're very frustrated, but they don't see the opportunity that God has been bringing to us. And so I would just encourage you in this particular block is that, focus on the time of what God's giving you. It's funny that in the Greek, there's actually 2 words for time. There's chronos and there's kairos. And kairos is really meaning the opportunity, the season, the fitting time, what's before us. And chronos is generally more chronological. It's more the order. It refers to more like a clock keeps time, or things that can be measured in seconds and minutes and hours and years. But a sequential moments that are expecting chronos is emphasizing, the duration of time. But Kairos is really looking forward to, the right timing, the seizing the opportunity or the season that we're coming in. And when you think of your small group ministry, think of it this way. Do you want to do things right, or do you want to do the right things? And when you're wanting to do things right, and this is my Achilles heel right now, you think of chronos. I'm always thinking, hey, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got to do this. But what I would encourage you to do, and this is, like I said, my Achilles heel, and I've got to really get my head around these things, because I like to do things right. But what's going to be important thing is to do the right things. And that's the opportunity portion in your small group ministry. Both are important. But in your small group ministry, or the area of your church, you work in your leadership, you're going to gravitate to one of those 2 time frames. And chronos would be doing things right. Kairos would be doing the right things. And so when you're looking at opportunity, you're going to have the opposition. We've talked a lot about that over the last number of podcasts. But when you're looking for the opportunity, remember, both of these times are important. But in order to align, you need to know where you and your leadership and your church's culture are leaning for you to seize the right opportunity that God is giving your culture. So opportunity plus opposition will equal God's will. Make sure you tackle both of them in the right frame of what kind of time you're going through.
That was a great leadership learning. Thanks for that, Steve. On to the grand finale, the trending topic. And in this episode, we're talking about the 5 levels of true fellowship. Take us home, Steve.
Yeah. And this is what I've been waiting for this, because fellowship and true, authentic fellowship, when I'm saying the word fellowship, is the foundation for the other 4 verbs in the Great Commission and the Great Commandment to happen, which is discipleship. How do you get people to serve? How do you get people to evangelize? And how do you get people to worship? And this is a great, these 5 levels, I would just encourage you to give them to your small group leaders. We call them hosts, and have them analyze where they're at in the levels of fellowship, because every level is important, but more times than not, churches deem fellowship as coffee and cookies, spending about 10 to 15 minutes together and staying at one level, maybe the second level. But what I want to encourage you to do is, in your small group ministry, is as we are been regathering, as we're resetting 2021 and trying to look forward to what's going on, I want to encourage you, post-Easter, what we've just gone through is really start to hone in on your groups and saying, which level are they at and which level do they need to get to? Because, we say it all the time, you want to get people to confess temptation before they're confessing sin. And part of what you have to understand is the degree and the level of where your small group is at, where your small group ministry is at with all their small groups, is going to be determining how authentic your fellowship is. So let me go through these really quick. There are 5 S's, no shock right there. First level is sharing. Now, sharing usually starts with very cliche surface talk. Hey, how are you? How's your day? I'm good. You're fine. How you doing? It's really a superficial level. And but sharing is where friendships can start. And so you do need those sharing opportunities. You need those times where you're just checking in with each other and seeing where you're at. But you want to take that to move to the next level, which is study. Now, study usually starts with the facts. This is where you can be like a lawyer and you can just go through all these fact things, and it's sharing what you know. Guys love to stay in the study level. They love to stay in this level number 2 because they can share stats. And you've heard Derek and I talk about that in college football. You can share stats till you're just have wasted hours upon hours. But you're talking about what how to share. You go a little bit below the surface level, but now you're just talking about Sports Center. You're talking about the sporting events that you're in. Who's going to win championships? Who's lost? What do you know? What do I know? And this study, when it starts with facts and stuff like that. But the dangerous thing is this study section can move very quickly just to what you're learning in curriculum, what you've studied about, what you've known about God's word. And you can almost get into the pinnacle of fellowship is Bible trivia. How much knowledge do you know? And it's a dangerous piece. It's an important piece. You've got to have cognitive, values that are biblical. But if you just stay at the study section, you can really miss where God's wanting you to go to. The third level is serving. Serving starts with, opinions. You're starting to share what you think. You're comfortable enough to have civility in your small groups. I love that in many of our small groups, they are on different spectrum ends to many of the 5 storms that we talked about in the last block. Global infirmity, social instability, financial insecurity, racial inequity, political incivility, and you can have people on differing views. But in this third level, you're able to start with sharing your opinions. You start to go through these different moments that you're sharing. You're getting a little bit of vulnerability out there saying, this is what I believe about, X, Y, or Z, when somebody else, in your group may not, but you can have civility that's starting to be present in there. And you start to move from just the opinions in this phase to the pinnacle part of, serving, where you're actually, even though you may not agree on something, this is where we can say, you may not see eye to eye, but you sure can walk hand in hand in serving together, making a difference. Because when you serve together, this is what veterans through war feel, is when they serve together, they're at another level of, fellowship that is out there. So you want to move from sharing to study to the serving to the fourth one, which is sacrificing. And this level, it starts with emotional parts. You're sharing how you feel. You start to disclose about how things are impacting you. So you're not talking about opinions, but you're sharing how you've been feeling about those opinions, how they've connected to you. And this helps us to not only connect with each other, but to empathize with each other. No matter what you're talking about in the storms that we've gone through, when you move from opinion to sharing what you feel like, and what happens is when you share the emotions that you feel, your small group should start to go into this level of sacrificing, where you're sacrificial for the person, that your empathy level kicks in. One of the things we've noticed that through civil unrest is that when you are in a multi-ethnic small group, your empathy rises because you start to feel what other people that are different than you are starting to feel. So it's in that sacrificial level where the emotional part is, taking you from just opinions that you have and you're able to talk about with civility to taking it deeper. And then the fifth level, so you've gone from sharing, where it's just, cliche, it's talking, to the study, where you're, start with facts, but you're actually learning biblical stuff, to the serving, which starts with opinions, but you're able to serve together in some of those opinions, to sacrificing, where you're connecting the emotional part behind the opinions. And then the last level is suffering. And suffering starts with the transparency of really sharing who you are. And it's the deepest level of communication. It requires the most vulnerability, and it requires the most authenticity to be able to share what you're going through. It tends to be the quickest path to reconciliation because you're of the level of sharing that you're at. But this starts with transparency, and it's risky, man. I'll tell you. But when the pain level's high enough with you, sometimes that's when groups share in transparency. But when it's built naturally and organically, you start to get to real, authentic fellowship when you get to this fifth level of suffering. Paul in Philippians is always, sharing his pain together, and he sympathizes with, feeling with people, to empathy, that he's willing to go through it with people. And so as you look at these five levels, here's what I would challenge you to do in your small group. When you look at sharing, study, serving, sacrifice, and suffering, start with your own small group and say, where are you at in your own small group? Before you start looking at the small groups throughout your small group ministry, look at where you're at, because the deeper we can go organically. But what I mean by that is, if you're just starting a group out and in week 2 or 3, someone jumps down to the suffering level when the other levels haven't been built up, it's called unequal disclosure, and it can set a real awkward phase in the group. It's not unrecoverable, but it's just something you got to realize. But as you're looking through your own small group, where are you at, and where do you need to go to in true fellowship, authentic fellowship, so that you're small group can be a model for your other small groups. And then as you're starting to look into your the health of your small groups that you're ministering to as the small group point person, start to look through and say, hey, what level of fellowship are they at? Because if you've gone through this pandemic and you're still in the sharing level or still in the study level, you've missed the beauty of what the gospel's talking about in true, authentic fellowship. So I just encourage you, as we wrap up this podcast, start to look at those 5 levels and see where you can go in your own small group ministry.
Those are the 5 levels of true fellowship. And Steve, I liked on the last one, number 5, suffering. You shared the deepest level of communication require the most vulnerability and authenticity. So good. So good.
Thank you for listening to Steve Gladen on Small Groups. If you like what you've heard, make sure you subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. If you want to learn more, make sure you check out smallgroupnetwork.com for more resources.